Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark O'Connell, Chief Exec of OCO Global. I'd like to welcome you to the Cardiff Capital Region's webinar on the theme of resilience, renewal and reach. Just a couple of little housekeeping rules before we get kicked off. Everybody will be on mute, including the panelists, which I'll introduce in a moment, until the end, and then we're going to have a Q&A where you can put questions in the chat bar or raise your hand to draw our attention. We're going to have a couple of presentations and keynotes from a number of panelists, followed by myself and Dr. Joachim Arnold before we move to questions. We will be recording the webinar and it will be downloadable from Invest Cardiff if you want to share it or revisit some parts of it. I, for one, am honoured on this St. Patrick's Day to be able to welcome you all to this Invest Cardiff event. In particular, when you're 8 points ahead of us in the Six Nations, and maybe resilience, recovery and reach might be a good introduction to a seminar on Welsh rugby, but we'll not go there. I'm sure there'll be a few comments in the Q&A on that later. So look, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists, beginning with, it's our pleasure to have with us Councillor Hugh Thomas, who's leader of Cardiff City Council. I'll be hearing from Hugh in a minute. Moving on then, we'll hear from Chris Sutton, who's representing the city deal here for Cardiff and in Cardiff Capital Region. We'd like to welcome as well Michael Charlton, who's the Director of Investment from the Department of International Trade, and he'll be sharing his perspectives on the sort of national programme for resilience and renewal around foreign investment. And then my colleague, Dr. Joachim Arnold, who's joining us from Frankfurt, who's an advisor to Siemens, and will be able to share some of their best practices from Germany around the ideas of regeneration and renewal. So look, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our leader, Hugh Thomas. Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Mark, for that introduction, and great to join you all. And can I remind you, Mark, and whilst I wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day, that St. Patrick was from Wales, just one of the many famous South Wales exports. Really great to be with you today to talk a little bit more about the Cardiff Capital Region and why I believe we've got a really compelling case for investment into Cardiff and the city region. Our product, very simply, is a skilled workforce, a great quality of life, and what will be in a few short years one of the best urban transport networks outside of London, with great connectivity to London as well. And with all those factors, we believe it's a product that can compete with any of the city regions in the UK and elsewhere. For example, half of our workforce is qualified to degree level or equivalent in Cardiff, one of the top cities in the UK in terms of that. We've got circa 70,000 students in the city, with some leading research coming out of our three universities. And we've got some really competitive clusters in growth industries. For example, all the leading challenger banks have a base here, and new fintech talent is emerging from within. Our life sciences sector is world leading, growing and benefiting from a forward-thinking health service. We've got some of the biggest budget TV shows ever made in the UK being made here on our doorstep. I mean, it's literally a stone's throw from my house. And the quality of life is also such an obvious benefit. Living in Cardiff, or indeed anywhere within the city region, you've got access very easily to a vibrant city centre with some of the best sporting and cultural offer available anywhere in Britain. You've got superlative coastline on your doorstep, and a national park within the city region boundaries. I don't think that there's anything comparable in any of the other UK cities, certainly. And it's no wonder, therefore, that we see, in our population growth, that Cardiff has been one of the fastest growing cities in the UK in recent decades. And in terms of infrastructure, we've seen the electrification of the Great Western Main Line, and now seeing the new metro for South East Wales coming on stream with the circa 100 stations with a turn up and go service for much of the network. Now, a lot of this has been achieved through partnership working, in particular through the work of the Cardiff Capital Region. Take something, for example, like our first project, the Compound Semiconductor Cluster, a project that brought together local, regional and national governments together. This is a sector that truly is one of the most competitive clusters where we have one of the most competitive clusters in the world, supplying much of the world's mobile phone supply chain. And I think it's true to say that most mobile phones in the world carry little bits of South Wales in them. And the benefits, I think, of being based here, are actually that you can speak to decision makers such as myself directly. And there's also consensus in what we do. The Cardiff Capital Region Cabinet, whilst we have discussion, we also have agreement, and we've been very good at actually gaining the support and consensus of Welsh and UK governments as well. And critically, we're supported by business, and we'll hear from Chris Sutton shortly. Finally, just to mention the skills and the sectors we have here. It's an obvious point, but we really see skills as the driver of our economic growth. We're lucky to have such great universities and colleges here, and they've been at the forefront of business growth in the region, linking directly with some of our key sectors, notably creative, cybersecurity, fintech, and life sciences. But we've also seen some real benefits of linking businesses with schools, particularly schools in areas which are traditionally areas of high poverty. Our Cardiff Commitment project, which is also working with partners across the region, does just that, building strong and meaningful relationships between employers and their workers with the leaders of the future in our schools at the moment. It is a schools to CEO approach that embeds what businesses do into our local schools and our local economy. So in summary, Mark, despite the pandemic, I believe the future is very bright for the Cardiff City region. We don't have some of the issues that much larger cities have in terms of congestion, density, pollution, and high prices. We've got the space to breathe and grow. And I don't see us being as sensitive either to the impact you'll see on commercial developments in some much bigger cities. Conversely, our strengths and our assets, skills, quality of life, and that infrastructure investment that's going in at the moment will only become more critical in leveraging investment into the area. So on that note, I'll hand over to my colleague from the Cardiff Capital Region, Chris Sutton. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning. We've heard a lot already about Cardiff Capital Region, and I think we'll hear more about this in the future as well. The 10 local authorities of South East Wales have a population of just over 1.3 million and generates over 50% of Welsh economic output. It runs from the 7 bridges in the east to Bridgend in the west and up to the heads of the valleys. It includes rural locations, Monmouthshire and the Vale of Glamorgan, but it also has some of the most disadvantaged communities in the UK in the mid and upper valleys. Now, the city deal includes 740 million reserved for the South Wales Metro, and that's the upgrade of the Valleys line, which, to be honest, needs it. This was a quote from James Price, the chief executive, a couple of years ago. But the good news is that over half of the 140 new trains are actually going to be built in our patch by manufacturer CAF. So that's good industrial strategy in terms of capturing that spend. So yes, the region is dominated by Cardiff, and that's been the driver of the Welsh economy in the past 20 years since devolution. The city has the ability to generate tens of thousands of jobs and has been one of the fastest growing cities in the UK in terms of population. And it's a vibrant and confident capital city, an administrative, cultural and commercial centre. And it's actually generated 1.5 million square foot of grade A floor space built in Cardiff City Centre in the past decade. That's on a par with cities like Leeds and Birmingham. And the main schemes have been north and south of the Great Western Main Line by developers Right Acres, shown here, and also JR Smart, and developers for occupiers such as Arnold, the BBC and HMRC. Financial and professional services firms form the core sector of demand, although increasingly we see fintech and insurance tech. We wait to see the impact of COVID on future working practices, and it may be that occupiers will seek smaller floor plates in the future. But let's also bear in mind that most of this accommodation is let on long leases, so that will take some time to work through. But businesses that we've canvassed seem keen to encourage workers back into the office when it's safe to do so, in order to get that greater co-working, the innovation, and also critically to develop junior staff. And we are seeing a growth in co-working and tech space, and firms like IndyCube, shown here, are trying to create those remote working hubs. But it's not just about Cardiff. This is a plan produced by the 10 local authorities quite a few years ago now, but we'll see a fully worked up strategic development plan for the region by 2025. And to the west, we see the Llantrisant to Bridgend corridor, and that's the sort of the manufacturing park of South Wales. Along the heads of the valleys, we've got a £1 billion investment in dualling that road. And that's opened up the north of the region from Abergavenny to Merthyr Tydfil, and it will go onwards westwards to Swansea. And Welsh Government are complementing our activity because they're developing so-called magnet investments. So for example, the National Digital Exploitation Centre in Ebervale, we've talked about semiconductors in Newport, creative industries in Cardiff Bay and also in Bridgend, and there's life sciences and diagnostics firms growing in a series of different locations along the M4 and linked into our largest hospitals. And Newport's well positioned at the gateway to Wales. And yes, it's overshadowed by big brothers Bristol and Cardiff, but it's actually got two projects that both neighbours would give their back teeth for. Because you've got the Celtic Manor Resort, and that's on a different scale to any other leisure facility in the Great Western Powerhouse. It's held the Ryder Cup and NATO Summit in the past year or so, in the past 10 years, sorry. And then meantime, you have the semiconductor cluster at Imperial Park, cutting edge technology, and this has attracted a UK government catapult centre under their Innovate UK banner, and indeed additional investment. If we go to the next photo, we'll also see the largest data centre next door. So Imperial Park, the next slide, will show you see here the semiconductor facility. NGD, Next Generation Data, has now been transferred to Vantage Data Centres. And there's a 1 million square foot building that's just come to the market here on a refurbishment basis. And next slide, we also see activity taking place in terms of speculative development. This is St Modwyn, who's developed 50,000 square foot here. They also developed the CAF facility. And they're now currently building two buildings of 100,000 and 30,000 square foot, whilst down in Bridgend, Trebor Developments are building a scheme of 60,000 square foot. But property forms just part of the business environment, and factors such as skills, infrastructure, and funding are likely to rank higher. But available grade A employment floor space can create the competitive advantage for one region over another. The City deal recognises the viability challenge of developing new grade A floor space, and therefore a sites and premises fund is being established with £50 million to support the development of new floor space across key sectors and prime locations, and hopefully in some of our more disadvantaged communities. CBRE will manage the scheme, building on their experience running funds for the Northwest and Northern Ireland. I'd be happy to pick up on any point later on in the Q&A. However, I now hand over to Michael Charlton from the Department for International Trade.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Charlton, Director of Investment at the Department for International Trade, and delighted as a Cardiffian to be joining you on this webinar this morning. I'm responsible for investment into the whole of the UK from all sectors and all markets and all modes of investment. So foreign direct investment, but also capital investment from sovereign wealth funds, institutional and pension funds, real estate funds, and also growth capital, so VCs, corporate VCs, and private wealth. I've been asked to say a few words on current kind of HMG priorities, their relationship to investment, and of course to the Cardiff City region. So some of you might have seen the Plan for Growth, which was issued along with the budget a week or so ago, a plan setting out government plans to support economic growth through significant investment in infrastructure skills and innovation. So, for example, government will look to redress Britain's historic underinvestment in infrastructure with 600 billion of gross public sector investment over the next 5 years, so the UK can truly become a united kingdom in terms of infrastructure. It also includes plans to make the UK a science and technology superpower and the best possible place to create green jobs through the Prime Minister's Green 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. So linking through, for example, to the Catapult Centre that Chris mentioned in his remarks. Secondly, I wanted to talk to you about a piece of HMGE strategy that you probably read about or heard about on the news or radio yesterday, something called the Integrated Review, which describes government's vision for the UK's role in the world over the next decade, both from a defence and foreign policy perspective. So why is this relative? Well, why is this important to investment in the Cardiff City region? Well, because it talks about a significant tilt to the Indo-Pacific region and a real focus on the fastest growing economies of Asia. So some of you will be aware the Prime Minister is going on a visit to India at the end of April. The UK has recently signed the UK-Japan CEPA, new trade agreement, and we've signalled our interest to joining CPTPP, all things which can have a positive impact on the Cardiff Capital Region. A few words on free trade and global Britain. Government has begun an ambitious programme of free trade agreement negotiations to really make the mantra of global Britain a reality. The aim is to secure agreements with countries accounting for 80% of UK's total trade within 3 years of having left the EU. So far, we've secured trade agreements with countries worth 63% of UK's total trade in 2019. And we've agreed trade deals with 66 countries plus the EU that account for £890 billion of UK bilateral trade. We're also in the process of negotiating future free trade agreements with the United States, Australia and New Zealand. And as I mentioned earlier, on the 1st of February, we submitted our notification of intent to begin the CPTPP accession process, first formal step towards accession of that trading bloc. A few words on levelling up. So the UK, by some measures, is one of the most geographically unequal developed countries in the world. While cities and larger towns in the greater southeast of England are among the most productive and prosperous places in Europe, some in the North Midlands and across the 3 devolved nations of Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland do lag behind. So the government set out its intention to address this inequality and level up underperforming and left behind parts of the UK through economic growth, underpinned by a programme of infrastructure development, investing in education and skills, science and R&D. And an important lever will also be how we use trade and investment as a mechanism for levelling up the economy. And as part of that, DIT is developing plans to establish new trade and investment hubs across the UK and including the 3 devolved nations, including Wales. Scotland was the first that we're in the process of establishing, and will be also establishing hubs in Cardiff and in Belfast. And those new trade and investment hubs will work closely with UK Export Finance, the world's #1 leading export credit agency, my team, and the newly created Office for Investment to support Welsh businesses in maximising the benefits of those new trading opportunities that I spoke about earlier on. And it's all part of something called the Places for Growth agenda, where you will have heard announcements in the budget in terms of the creation of the new National Infrastructure Bank in Leeds, a new Northern Economic Campus in Darlington, and other announcements. A quick word on free ports. At the budget, the Chancellor announced 8 free ports from 8 regions across England, and subject to agreeing governance arrangements and successfully completing their business cases, we envisage that these free ports will begin operation from late 2021. Successful bids from the likes of East Midlands Airport, and the Liverpool City region, and then a range of seaports, so Plymouth and South Devon, Solent, Teesside, Thames, Humber, and Felixstowe and Harwich. Very keen to also work with the Welsh Government, the Scottish Government, and the Northern Irish Government in terms of announcing future free ports in Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And I know there's very significant interest from the port sector in Wales, and the Treasury are actively engaging with the Welsh Government in terms of the opportunity that may create for Wales. A few words on investment, which is my particular responsibility. So a key component of my team going forward will be creating an investment atlas. We have great relationships with a whole range of international investors and some of the largest owners of mobile capital in the world, but we really have to hone the offer, the proposition that we're passing to these investors. So this investment atlas will build on the work we already do to identify, qualify, and promote investable opportunities, capital opportunities, FDI opportunities, and growth capital opportunities. So for scale-up companies looking for international capital. And the intention is to have a network of investment scouts across the UK, including in Wales, to work with local partners and stakeholders to identify and assess which sites, projects, opportunities, and companies to showcase to investors. So linking back again to what Chris said in terms of the magnet investments that the Welsh Government is looking at, we want to create a link between the two. We already actively promote 6 key capital projects in Wales and a number in the Cardiff City region. So the Cardiff Edge Life Sciences Park, Cardiff Central Quay, Nell's Point in Barry Island, and indeed are looking at a further project, the Cardiff Parkway, the new commercial business park to be developed alongside the new Cardiff Parkway station being constructed by Network Rail. We also shine a light on particular places and investment opportunities through our High Potential Opportunities programme. And as the leader of the council mentioned, we have a number of high potential opportunities that we showcase in Wales, one around compound semiconductors, another around medtech health opportunities, and we're looking at others. Wales continues, and the Cardiff Capital Region in particular, continues to be a magnet for investment. Chris mentioned the CAF project from Spain, which we were heavily involved with, but there are plenty of others, and even in an environment where foreign direct investment has fallen by 42%, this year, according to UNCTAD, the UK continues, I'm not saying for one moment we haven't seen a fall in investment, but it continues to be resilient, and that's because the economic fundamentals in the UK remain strong for investors. So dependent on the sector that we talk about, and Mark will be coming on to talk more about that, we've seen a lot of resilience and a lot of continued interest. So I'll pause there and look forward to taking questions later on. Can't remember who I'm passing over to, forgive me.
It's to me, Michael, and thanks for that very compelling tour of some of the national ambitions, and great. I mean, the reach in the title of this seminar is embodied here by Michael at the sort of sharp end of the national efforts to promote investment. And no better ambassador than a fellow Cardiffian to champion our cause. And again, I think we heard some pretty compelling preparedness and readiness by Councillor Thomas and Chris Sutton on, this isn't just a pandemic knee-jerk. These plans and preparedness for to future-proof the Cardiff Capital Region have been afoot for some time, and it was pretty convincing to see the readiness of the region to receive and embed significant technology and foreign investment. So look, I'm going to share with you now a few thoughts on the demand side, where we see the opportunity for Cardiff and how we're positioning ourselves. So you bear with me just while I pull up my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. Yeah, the headline is resilience. Michael's mentioned already which are the sectors and markets that have shown themselves to be pandemic proof. Where do we expect the renewal to come from, and how are we going to communicate these messages to our target audiences, which is partly you, and thank you all for joining us this morning. Okay. So I'm going to wander through some FDI headlines with a bit of a focus on Wales, and then specifically on the Cardiff Capital Region, how we can position that for greatness. We'll look at some best practices internationally, led by Dr. Joachim Arnold, looking at how major sites and overcapacity in manufacturing in Europe have been repurposed to great effect, with some extremely positive economic and social impacts. And then lastly, I'll just rejoin the sort of themes that Michael has picked up on, Michael Charlton from DIT, about how we reach the audiences for these messages. So beginning with resilience, as Michael has already mentioned, Michael Charlton, that is, everywhere has seen a correction. Internationally, foreign investment is down some 40% globally. And by that, I mean the actual numbers of projects. Capital flows are severely constrained too. The good news is there's a lot of pent-up demand. There's a lot of free capital in the world. So those regions that are ready with an offer to accommodate and host projects will be well positioned. We can see that Wales' picture in terms of downturn is reflective of the UK as a whole, but it is worth pointing out, in spite of our internal challenges around leaving the European Union and the impact of the pandemic on the UK, compared to other major recipient markets in mainland Europe like France and Germany, we've fared slightly better in terms of the FDI correction. So looking again at the sort of city picture, and these are significant hubs for FDI attraction, we can see that most of them have taken a hit. And why is this interesting? Because there has been a concentration, and poor Michael has to explain it every day to his regional partners and other UK cities, why London sort of dominates and overshadows so much of our performance. It's the same story in Germany and France, that capital cities do seem to draw in. But I think there's an opportunity for Cardiff here, in that it's a regional capital, but equally, it's in terms of cost and accessibility and population density, it has a lot more to offer to a new kind of dispersed workforce, and sensitivities about lifestyle, environmental and sustainability challenges. So I think within this sort of dark picture, there are some positives for cities like Cardiff. And we can see, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of corrections, and the levelling up ambition, Wales, broadly speaking, has, stayed kind of mid-table. It's improving market share, as we can see, within the overall UK. So its per capita performance in investment attraction has been, middling to good. And as we'll see, in terms of the actual quality of those projects, which is a big direction of travel for the UK nationally, never mind the volume, feel the quality, feel the value and the impact of investment. So Wales is already well advanced, and some of the examples shown, and even examples that Chris Sutton would have shared earlier, talk to this sort of focus on fewer but better and high impact projects, and that's precisely the way the UK nationally is going. And then if we look at the performance of the Cardiff Capital Region and Cardiff City Region, this point that I make in terms of, while we've had a correction in project numbers on the right-hand side of half the numbers of 2019, the job hit has been less severe, down a quarter. Okay, tough, but nevertheless, we're seeing on the bar chart that we're managing to look after our existing investors and achieve good job retention and expansion, as well as some new stuff. And if we sort of aggregate the Cardiff Capital Region, including sort of Bridgend and Newport, we see that knocking on the door of half, or 40-45% in the last 5 years of all the investment has flowed into this agglomeration, which speaks to the importance of presenting our best foot forward internationally and keeping the story simple. And of course, there are spillover effects, as we know. I mean, the relative distances between some of these places are almost irrelevant from an investor and travel to work experience. Again, I talk specifically to the quality dimension, and if league tables are important, and Cardiff as a city is in sort of 6th position in terms of the head count in terms of jobs, with almost 2,000 jobs secured over the last 5 years, thanks to foreign investment efforts. And if we look at the Cardiff Capital Region as a whole, bringing in those other communities, it actually rises up to 4th position with 2,400 jobs created over the same period, and some nice examples of blue chip companies that have chosen the capital region as their home. Now, on the question of resilience, Michael Charlton touched on placing the right bets nationally, and if we look down to where Cardiff's priority sectors lie in the color blue, we can see we're on the right positions on the board. Combination of the renewables and sustainable industries, med tech is important, and will feature in one of the national HPOs with Cardiff in in the primary position there. Albeit there's been corrections in the volumes in terms of digital, creative, pharma, etc. These are perceived as resilient sectors and have taken less of a hit than some of the more exposed sectors in aerospace, retail, and hospitality. And the good news is, and you've probably heard it already from in Michael's remarks, by design rather than accident, Cardiff's priorities sit very neatly and very well aligned with the new industrialist strategy and the commitments around net zero by 2030. So we're in perfect lockstep with the national agenda, and there will be opportunities to get on the sort of glide path of global Britain and some of the national investment conferences that will be coming up in the next 12 months to shout a little louder about our ambition. Again, focus is the sort of the operative word in effective investment attraction, and Ken Poole and the team on that side of the Council in Economic Development under Neil have been rightly focused on North America and the US. In fact, until we were thwarted by the pandemic, there was a major offensive focused on West Coast VC planned, West Coast venture capital firms that we were planning to engage with, and that ambition hasn't gone away. And I talked about the sort of pent up capital. As soon as we're able to, we'll be back in front of those influencers trying to bring a tale of their clients into the Cardiff Capital Region. Europe remains important, as you see, across the breadth of the sectors that we're targeting and performing in, specifically Netherlands in digital, Spain and Germany in life sciences, and France in financial services and fintech. And interestingly, talking to the Indo-Pacific tilt, India already features in our kind of client base for financial and business services, and taking advantage of the slipstream that the Prime Minister's visit will create there next month. We want to make sure that the Cardiff messages are front and center of that engagement. This is kind of interesting analysis in terms of the placemaking agenda, which is a big part of how Cardiff Capital Region is presenting itself. So we look at a number of variables across the pillars of the investment environment, the visit or tourism environment, the livability indices, and as a place to study and make your sort of education. I mean, Cardiff is in the top quintile, I think the right expression is, so in the top sort of 15% of out of a long list of 108 towns across the UK, which is, a pretty impressive relative to per capita, a very impressive score, and in particular on the livability index, which is a key driver of investment today. It's right up there in the top 10, and it's 17th on Invest. So these things are very well aligned. Livability and is a key driver of what places to study and to stay once you've qualified, and all the work that we've seen in terms of improving the built environment, embrace of sustainability, the cycle routes and pedestrianisation are all driving those scores upwards, and will be a key part of Cardiff's achievability in terms of attracting and retaining talent, which is the sort of kryptonite and the new battlefield for investment attraction today. You can see some of the other peer cities across on the right hand side, like Bath and Bristol in the southwest, and then Belfast and Aberdeen further north. So, we need to be alive to the fact that we're not competing with 108 towns. We're competing with a few who have chosen some of the same priorities as we have, and we need to position effectively against them. I like this because it sort of helps us with understand our segmentation. So in the invest category, we are described as a Silicon upstart, which I like that because it talks to our tech ambition, our knowledge economy, and our venture and funded businesses that we're trying to bring into down the M4 corridor into the Cardiff Capital Region. On the visit piece or tourism piece, Cardiff is extremely well positioned in its heritage and coastal offer. Trying to lift the number of tourism bed nights is a key priority for the visitor agenda on the tourism strategy. On the livability, I mean, it's described and defined as urban edge, which I like because it suggests that Cardiff is cool, popular with millennials and the sort of woke generation, which is extremely important, in demonstrating to investors and students that we have the sort of inclusion and diversity and affordability that's so important for that generation. We're not a big brand, we're a sort of a challenger brand, a disruptor, which I like. And then finally, and equally important, is the study agenda, some great high quality third level options, and moreover, the possibility to stay there once you've qualified, which is a big factor and not always prevalent in some of the other, Russell Group city universities, where yes, you can qualify there, but you may not be able to afford to live there. We have that advantage here in Cardiff Capital Region. So now, before I get into how we reach those target audiences, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Joachim Arnold, who'll explain some of the best practices from Germany.
Thank you very much, Mark, and hello, everyone. Let me share my screen here as well. And hope that is, you can all see that now. Yeah, so I'm leading on the investment attraction services within OCO, and we are dealing with a lot of requests in terms of how to match investors with industrial sites, with regions, and with government and agencies that are interested to promote those specific assets. And typically, over the last years, it's always still a very high priority to attract greenfield investments, but increasingly there's different forms of international engagement, and we need to deal with these realities, of which one is how do we reuse existing sites, and how do we deal with brownfield developments. And there I brought from Germany on recent projects that we had the chance to work with, some examples with very good and also very challenging. So let me just give you a quick insight into those two examples. So one is, and you might have heard of the GM or Opel plant in Bochum, which was in 2012, the decision was taken to close down the plant, and it's based in North Rhine-Westphalia, in a very populated region, but quite in a structural change from coal and from steel to the new realities of our economy and our industries. And here it was the decision was taken to close the plant and try to find an investor, and then obviously find a new use for the whole site. And essentially what we're now seeing here is from after more than 3,000 jobs that got lost to a demolished plant, to 6,000 new jobs in areas as like IT security, software development. So a very interesting example of a positive change, and this site being at the center of it. So just first, some further detail on this process. So in 2014, it was the decision taken to create a bespoke and dedicated agency for this site, which was called Bochum Perspective, funded by the city and in collaboration with Opel. So they shared 50% of the cost and even of the future demolition cost, quite a large commitment, which was an essential success factor of this site transformation. But a number of other more organizational challenges came up early, and one of the key factors that helped to succeed the transformation was actually successful regional cooperation. So it takes time, and it took more than 12 months to build consensus to get actors together and to get funding in place as well. But it was a critical time in 2014 to get everyone on board and work towards a common goal, and that enabled them to go into a concept development of proper rezoning of an urban development concept that fits everyone's interests and needs across the region, and even up to a national level. And that was very much in the national interest because of this large layoff. And it also helped to then go into a very specific and detailed investor attraction strategy, and what industries work, which doesn't, where can we compete in the region, but also in the wider context of attracting investments within Germany. The results are excellent. 6,000 new jobs created and committed, 11 projects. There was one which was basically like the key investment by DHL with 700 jobs in a more of a fulfillment center type, but now also VW invested in this IT security project, which is a major driver for also structural industrial change. And the future of this all is now this mark, it's called Mark 51.7, which are the coordinates of this place. There's a vision to create a technology campus, and with the university there and multiple other investors that are interested to create a new ecosystem. So this is an exceptional positive example of successful structural change. Now let me just touch on another one, which is in an earlier stage. So Siemens, that we supported now in Rüstorf, which is in the very south of Germany. You can see that little circle, and obviously the world doesn't end at the border, but it's still, you know, very rural and quite a challenging location. And Siemens decided to close down this plant, relocated to Eastern Europe, and they're spinning out of the traditional motors and drive activities anyhow. So 600 people were unemployed or laid off at this point. But we are facing a different environment than in Bochum here, where 2017, again, dedicated agency was founded. But actually the biggest asset in all of this was that the available talent was absorbed by the local labor market, which in itself is a positive, but it didn't really help to find a reuse for the existing site. Furthermore, you know, the site topography is challenging with a very fragmented environment. So again, here the decision was taken not to tear it down. That was the big, the good decision in Bochum, but here in very small scale type of halls and very hard to market. And 2 years in, there wasn't really a strategy. So 3 people deployed that were trying to find investors, but really didn't know where to look for. And that's where we came in and also just focused that strategy of where are the real opportunities based on the supply of the site, as well as what are the trends and who could be the next potential investors. And there we got into, you know, very detailed segmentation of supply chains and understanding what's with this challenging site and where can we find a match with investor interests. This also led to you know, finally some very good marketing material under the brand of Technoparts Siemens, which is, you know, part of Siemens Real Estate. And here we have then designed this or agreed on a theme on energy flows here, whereas everything around battery and more like the end, the second life and the reuse of batteries was the segment where we think there's the biggest potential. And yes, we also then did proactive collaboration with potential investors, and interesting to see first positive results where Rolls-Royce now expands their battery production and maintenance facility and moves into one of the halls. So what are the key takeaways before handing back to Mark? the setup and management up front to have a regional stakeholder cooperation consensus of what's the right concept and how to move forward, a focal institution in the lead that drives the agenda and that keeps everyone aligned with a strong financial backing, obviously, a concise concept, both technical, commercial, which gives investors planning security and a long-term perspective for the site to be developed and transformed. And then obviously what's the competitive positioning and the attraction strategy that goes with it, so that the right investors can be targeted in the implementation phase. So let me pause here and pass back to Mark, and that's the part for how to design Renewal.
Thank you, Joachim. I'll just go back to my screen share to complete this. Yeah, so look, the point of inviting Dr. Arnold was perhaps to inspire us as to some of the strategic investment opportunities and how we could package and present them. I'm thinking specifically of the Ford Assembly at Bridgend, and clearly what Chris described in Abbeyvale around Semicon is close to best practice. So it's not unique to Germany, but there's clearly some learnings here about understanding the industries of the future, presenting the site in a way that reaches those target audiences and achieves maximum economic impact. And that sort of segues neatly into, how we reach our target audiences. Now, I've already, talked a little bit about, the value of DIT and the national program. And what I've got up here is a little sort of tableau of high value, high potential opportunities. And the top left is on rail. So this is a neat and I think pioneering way of sort of uniting a capability that lives and is concentrated in a region of the UK and a sector, an industrial priority. So in the case of rail, and we heard the example of the rolling stock from Chris, but this one has the focus as Doncaster and the HS2 expansion, just by way of example. There are Wales features in most of the ones that are presented in on the tableau here, and there's about, I think, 20 to 25 of these on the stocks for 2021. And why these are interesting campaigns is it's not just a bunch of nice collateral, but there's actually, a resourcing around overseas market engagement, a target list of specific investors, and an ambition for must-win companies for the UK. So it's very much a soup to nuts approach in terms of end-to-end journey and resourcing around that. And it's, good to know, and it's thanks to the engagement of Welsh Assembly Government, that Wales will be priming a couple that, as you see on the right side, in the medtech space and in the semiconductor space. So this is a very important channel to have the Cardiff Capital Region and Wales voice and capabilities on the national and international stage through the DIT network. Then in terms of channels, I mean, again, I've had the privilege of sharing the stump with your leader and some of the other, I'm guessing, audience participants in MIPIM a couple of years ago when, life was normal. And really and truly, Cardiff does, punch above its weight in terms of attracting and being well positioned for the investors of the future. So I talk about a couple, I mean, MIPIM unfortunately should be taking place about now and has been sort of rescheduled again until it was 1st June and now September. We're still hoping and considering to be there, but possibly we might segue into the Expo Real in Germany in October, when it might be a little safer. But really what I wanted to present here is just that there are multiple channels where we can reach and address target audiences with our message, starting with, Invest Cardiff, through the capital region, through the Welsh Assembly government, all the way up to the national programs. And then there'll be selectivity about which markets and which events we use to go to market, rather than just, a kind of throwing mud at the wall and hoping for the best. This is very much a targeted approach. Look, just to finalize and finish, under the themes of resilience, I really want to say to you that I'm persuaded, and I see a lot of good and bad practice in this area, that Cardiff Capital Region has the right focus, has got its ducks in a row in terms of the right markets and target sectors. It's got a proposition that brings in money. With the city deal, embraces the good principles of the holistic principles of placemaking. So it's not just a spreadsheet-based promotion. It's actually a whole, holistic approach to quality of life, to live there, to which are more and more important post-pandemic than we ever believed possible. And the readiness of these strategic sites, I think, gives us something to work with. And then, as I've just described, the reach, and it's great to have the audience, which are all part of that reach and multiplier effect, as well as the national program working in behind us. So look, in the remaining moments, we have been getting a few questions, and so I'll stop my sharing and maybe start with a couple of questions, initially perhaps for the leader. So, Hugh, there has been some reflections on whether, the M4 corridor and this access, to the rest of the UK is an opportunity or a threat. To what extent are the spillover opportunities real or imagined? And, post-pandemic, how different will that look? So, if you had any sort of vision on that, it'd be helpful to share.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I was struck by the data in your presentation, actually showing the preponderance of Cardiff, Newport, and Bridgend within the Wales context for attracting FDI. So I certainly don't think we can push water uphill. I think we need to respond to where potential investors are looking and try and facilitate that. But I do think also we need to work on our connectivity, and this is absolutely where the South Wales Metro comes in, to be able to connect all the communities in Southeast Wales with the job opportunities wherever they are. There are certainly opportunities, and Chris touched on some of the industrial and logistics kind of opportunities across the whole region, not just concentrated on the M4, certainly. And I've been very clear throughout in terms of how the city deal operates. I would expect the majority of the wider investment fund to be deployed to level up north of the M4. But as I said, we've got to also be responsive to where businesses want to be located, and there are certainly attractions, and I touched on skills in particular, and that density of population within Cardiff and Newport in particular.
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. Michael Charlton, a question around what sort of investment might look like post-pandemic, and are cities threatened? I mean, the hybrid model, as people talk about, in terms of the sort of some remote and some back to the office. What are you feeling or seeing in terms of the demand side and inquiries that are coming through? Is it sort of prime time city centre or a bit of a mix, Michael?
It's a bit of a mix, Mark, and certainly the ability to work from home that the pandemic has demonstrated can happen, with lots of businesses actually increasing their productivity. Certainly creates lots of opportunities as we see it from a levelling up agenda. However, also difficult to build culture when you're not co-located with your colleagues. And so I think certainly the city centre is not dead from the conversations I'm having with investors, and I think it will. It'll vary. So interesting, as a US investor we've been working with that's made its first investment into Northern Ireland, and the 75 jobs that it's creating in Northern Ireland are all going to be home working. They're all going to be remote jobs. But I would suggest that currently is the exception. And I think the type of projects that I referred to earlier on that we've been promoting in the Cardiff Capital Region are the type of projects which will continue to attract the interest of investors, I should say.
Thank you,
Unfortunately, Michael. I'm going to have to drop off at this point. I have another webinar to do. So thanks, and enjoy the rest of the session.
Thanks. Well, we will try and wrap up. I see we're just knocking on the door of the 11 o'clock. Chris, just before we finish, I'd really like to, did anything, I mean, the way you described the developments, around the sort of Semicon park, it feels like, you're doing a lot of the kind of things that Dr. Arnold described in some of the regeneration sites in Germany. Is that fair? Or?
Well, you're right. We have our fair share of post-industrial sites in Wales, and it's trying to find the right uses for those. The semiconductor sector there it's a UK leading, indeed perhaps world leading cluster. So where you've got that, the one point I picked out of Joachim's point was local leadership as well, and I think that's so important here, having the combination of different layers of government. But to me, the Cardiff Capital Region team, with Hugh as one of the leaders there, is actually driving this thing forward. So that local leadership point is so important.
Well, look, that's a nice note to end on. And I think we had the pledge from our leader at the top end of the agenda that his primary job is to knock heads together and present a united and coherent voice to the investor. I don't know, Leader, if you'd like to sort of have the final say.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's been really interesting session actually, and really interesting to hear Joachim's perspectives from Germany, but also Mark, your assessment and that of Michael in terms of what the next few months and years look like, and what I sense is the popular narrative is one of gloom. And actually, when you look at the data, there is much more ground for optimism. From Cardiff's perspective in the city region, we want to enable our homegrown businesses to get back to growth, and we need to build on our strengths to attract new enterprises into the region as well, because we believe we have a compelling offer to them that will enable them to prosper as well. And off the back of the data you were saying, you were showing. I think there's a strong case for optimism, in particular around the future of the Cardiff City region.
Thank you very much, Leader, and a nice note, an optimistic one to finish on. I think, as it's been mentioned, the presentations will all be available, and the session has been recorded, and you can visit it on Invest Cardiff website. So just remains for me to thank everyone for tuning in this morning, and wish you all again a happy St. Patrick's Day, since you're the only thing keeping me from my first green beer of the day. Happy St. Patrick's Day.